Picture this moment: you're scrolling through your social media feed, watching friends celebrate promotions, anniversaries, and weekend adventures. Everyone appears radiant, successful, unshakable. Meanwhile, something inside you feels like it's quietly dissolving. Not dramatically, there's no theatrical breakdown, no obvious signs of distress. Just a persistent, gnawing sense that the person you show the world isn't the person you truly are inside. This is the anatomy of invisible breaking, and it's far more common than we dare to acknowledge. What most people don't realize is that inner fracturing rarely announces itself with fanfare. Unlike physical injuries that demand immediate attention, emotional wounds often masquerade as normalcy. They hide behind our morning routines, professional achievements, and social interactions. We become skilled architects of our own facades, constructing elaborate emotional buildings while the foundation slowly erodes beneath us. Consider Sarah, a marketing executive who appears to have everything together. She delivers presentations with confidence, maintains an active social calendar, and responds to emails with practiced efficiency. Yet every night she stares at her ceiling, wondering when everything started feeling so hollow. The promotion she worked toward for years brought no satisfaction. The relationship that once excited her now feels like performing in a play she doesn't remember auditioning for. Sarah's experience illustrates what psychologists call high-functioning depression, the ability to maintain external productivity while experiencing profound internal emptiness. It's breaking inside with a smile, succeeding while slowly suffocating. Recent advances in neuroscience reveal fascinating insights about how our brains process hidden emotional pain. When we suppress authentic emotions repeatedly, specific neural pathways strengthen while others weaken. The prefrontal cortex, our brain's CEO, becomes hyperactive, constantly managing and controlling emotional expression. Meanwhile, the limbic system, where we process genuine feelings, begins to atrophy from neglect. Dr. Marc Brackett's groundbreaking research at Yale University demonstrates that emotional suppression creates what he terms emotional labor overload. The brain expends enormous energy maintaining the disconnect between inner reality and outer presentation. This constant effort manifests as chronic fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and a persistent sense of emptiness that no external achievement can fill. Think of it like running two operating systems simultaneously on your mental computer. One system manages your public persona, articulate, capable, resilient. The other processes your authentic emotional experience, confused, exhausted, disconnected. The processing power required to maintain both systems eventually overwhelms your psychological infrastructure. Here's where the story becomes truly fascinating. Those who break inside often appear strongest to the outside world. They become masters of what psychologists call emotional regulation. Not in healthy ways, but through sophisticated defense mechanisms that protect them from vulnerability. Marcus, a successful attorney, never missed a deadline, never raised his voice in meetings, and never seemed overwhelmed by pressure. Colleagues admired his calm demeanor and unflappable nature. What they couldn't see was the nightly ritual of sitting in his car after work, unable to summon the energy to walk into his own home. The strength everyone admired was actually a complex system of emotional numbing that had gradually disconnected him from his own life. This presents a profound irony: the very qualities we celebrate in our culture, emotional control, consistent performance, never letting others down, can sometimes signal the deepest forms of inner struggle. We've created a society that rewards emotional suppression while pathologizing authentic vulnerability. Breaking inside rarely results from single catastrophic events. Instead, it emerges from an accumulation of micro-disappointments, unprocessed grief, and persistent misalignment between our authentic selves and our performed identities. Consider the following seemingly minor experiences that can contribute to inner fracturing. The friend who consistently cancels plans, but expects you to always be available. The family member who remembers your mistakes but forgets your achievements. The romantic partner who loves the idea of you, but seems uninterested in who you actually are. The workplace that demands your passion while treating you as replaceable. The social circle where you feel like a supporting character in everyone else's story. Each of these experiences creates what researchers call relational microtrauma, small wounds to our sense of worth, belonging, and authenticity. Individually, they seem manageable. Collectively, they erode our psychological foundation until we find ourselves unable to recognize the person staring back from the mirror. When emotions remain unprocessed, they don't simply disappear. Instead, they manifest through what psychologists term emotional leakage, unexpected moments when suppressed feelings surface in seemingly unrelated situations. You find yourself crying during a commercial about laundry detergent. A stranger's casual kindness leaves you overwhelmed with gratitude. A minor inconvenience triggers disproportionate anger. These aren't signs of instability. They're your psyche's attempt to process accumulated emotional residue. Dr. Susan David, a Harvard psychologist specializing in emotional agility, explains that suppressed emotions are like beach balls held underwater. The more pressure applied, the more forceful their eventual emergence. This is why people often describe feeling crazy or overreactive when experiencing emotional leakage. They're not losing their minds, they're encountering the natural consequences of emotional suppression. To understand why we break inside silently, we must examine the cultural messages that shape our relationship with emotional expression. From childhood, most of us receive subtle but persistent training in emotional suppression. Big boys don't cry. You're being too sensitive. Don't be so dramatic. Other people have it worse. Just think positive. You need to be stronger. These messages, often delivered with good intentions, teach us that authentic emotional expression is unacceptable, burdensome, or weak. We learn that love and acceptance are conditional upon our ability to manage our emotions in ways that don't inconvenience others. This conditioning is particularly intense for marginalized communities, who face additional pressure to appear non-threatening or easygoing to navigate social and professional spaces safely. The result is generations of people who have learned to prioritize others' comfort over their own emotional authenticity. What happens to our bodies when we chronically suppress emotional expression? The physiological consequences of breaking inside silently are profound and well documented. Chronic emotional suppression triggers persistent activation of the body's stress response system. Cortisol levels remain elevated, immune function decreases, and inflammation increases throughout the body. Studies show that people who consistently suppress emotions have higher rates of autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular disease, and chronic fatigue. The vagus nerve, our body's primary pathway for emotional regulation, becomes dysregulated when we chronically disconnect from authentic feelings. This manifests as difficulty sleeping, digestive issues, chronic tension, and a persistent sense of being wired but tired. Dr. Gabor Mate's extensive research on the connection between emotional suppression and physical illness reveals that many chronic conditions have emotional roots. The body keeps score of unprocessed emotions, storing them as physical symptoms when the mind refuses to acknowledge them directly. People who break inside often become extraordinarily skilled at emotional masking, the ability to present a carefully curated version of themselves while their authentic experience remains hidden. This skill, while protective, comes at enormous psychological cost. Emotional masking requires constant vigilance. Every interaction becomes a performance where spontaneous emotional expression is carefully monitored and controlled. The cognitive load of maintaining this performance is exhausting, leaving little mental energy for genuine connection, creativity, or personal growth. Consider Jennifer, a successful therapist who spent her days helping others process emotions while remaining completely disconnected from her own. She could identify subtle emotional nuances in her clients while being unable to name what she was feeling beyond fine or tired. Her professional competence masked profound personal emotional illiteracy. Perhaps the most devastating aspect of breaking inside is the profound loneliness it creates. When our authentic experience remains hidden, we become isolated even in crowded rooms. We long for connection while simultaneously maintaining the barriers that prevent it. This loneliness is particularly acute because it's self-imposed. We could reach out, could risk vulnerability, could ask for help, but the conditioning that taught us to suppress emotions also taught us that needing others is weakness, that our struggles are burdens, that love is earned through performance rather than granted through authentic presence. The result is a peculiar form of relational poverty, surrounded by people who care about us, while feeling fundamentally unknown and unseen. We become experts at giving others what they need while remaining mysteries to ourselves and others. Here's where the narrative takes an unexpected turn. Breaking inside, while painful, often contains profound wisdom. The cracks in our emotional foundation reveal where we've been carrying weight that isn't ours, where we've been living according to others' expectations rather than our own truth. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion demonstrates that people who've experienced deep inner struggle often develop enhanced emotional intelligence, increased empathy, and greater capacity for authentic connection. if they learn to process their experiences with awareness rather than suppression. The sensitivity that makes us vulnerable to breaking inside is the same sensitivity that allows us to notice subtleties others miss, to connect deeply with human experience, to create art, literature, and innovations that touch the human heart. Many of our greatest artists, leaders, and healers have learned to transform their capacity for deep feeling from a source of pain into a source of wisdom and contribution. Healing from breaking inside requires what I call emotional archaeology, the careful process of excavating buried feelings, examining them with curiosity rather than judgment, and integrating them into a more complete understanding of ourselves. This process isn't about dramatic emotional purging or constant emotional expression. Instead, it involves developing what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and name specific emotions with precision. Rather than the binary of fine or not fine, we learn to recognize the subtle differences between disappointment and grief, between anxiety and excitement, between loneliness and solitude. Emotional archaeology also involves examining the stories we've told ourselves about our experiences. Often we've assigned meanings to events that served us at the time, but no longer reflect our current reality. The rejection that once felt like evidence of our unworthiness might be reframed as incompatibility. The failure that once felt like personal deficiency might be understood as part of the learning process. Recent discoveries in neuroplasticity reveal that our brains remain capable of profound change throughout our lives. The neural pathways that support emotional suppression can be rewired to support emotional awareness and authentic expression. This rewiring happens through what neuroscientists call experience-dependent plasticity, repeated experiences that gradually reshape brain structure and function. Each time we notice an emotion without suppressing it, each time we name a feeling without judgment, each time we respond to ourselves with compassion rather than criticism, we strengthen neural pathways that support emotional well-being. The process requires patience and repetition. Just as physical muscles develop through consistent exercise, emotional muscles develop through consistent practice. The goal isn't perfect emotional expression, but rather increased awareness and choice in how we respond to our inner experience. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of breaking inside is its potential to catalyze what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. Positive psychological change that emerges from struggling with highly challenging circumstances. People who navigate inner fracturing consciously often report 5 key areas of growth: greater appreciation for life's simple pleasures and fleeting moments, deeper, more authentic relationships based on genuine connection rather than performed compatibility, increased sense of personal strength and resilience developed through surviving difficult experiences, enhanced spiritual development and connection to something larger than themselves, clarification of priorities and values that guide decision-making. This growth doesn't negate the pain of breaking inside or suggest that suffering is necessary for development. Rather, it acknowledges that when we respond to inner fracturing with awareness and compassion, we can emerge with expanded capacity for wisdom, connection, and contribution. In a culture that celebrates emotional control and consistent performance, authentic vulnerability becomes a revolutionary act. It challenges the fundamental assumption that worth is earned through perpetual strength and introduces the radical possibility that we might be loved for who we are rather than what we do. This doesn't mean oversharing or emotional dumping. Healthy vulnerability involves choosing trusted relationships and appropriate contexts for authentic emotional expression. It means saying "I'm struggling" instead of "I'm fine" when asked by someone who genuinely cares. It means acknowledging when we need support rather than pretending we have everything under control. The courage required for authentic vulnerability is profound because it risks everything the protective mechanisms were designed to prevent: rejection, judgment, abandonment. Yet research consistently shows that people who risk appropriate vulnerability experience greater life satisfaction, deeper relationships, and improved mental health. When someone begins living more authentically after breaking inside, the effects extend far beyond their individual experience. Authentic presence gives others permission to be real, creating ripple effects that can transform families, friendships, and entire communities. Children who see adults processing emotions healthily learn that feelings are manageable rather than dangerous. Partners in relationships where both people practice emotional authenticity report greater intimacy and satisfaction, Workplaces where emotional intelligence is valued alongside technical competence show increased creativity, collaboration, and employee well-being. The person who learns to honor their inner experience becomes a catalyst for cultural change, challenging the systems that promote emotional suppression and pioneering new ways of being human together. The goal of healing from breaking inside isn't to eliminate all emotional pain or to never struggle again. Instead, it's integration, the process of weaving our broken places into the larger tapestry of who we are becoming. Integration involves accepting that we are complex beings capable of contradictory experiences. We can be strong and vulnerable, confident and uncertain, joyful and sad, often simultaneously. The attempt to present a consistent, uncomplicated version of ourselves to the world is what creates the conditions for breaking inside in the first place. When we integrate our struggles into our story, rather than hiding them, we become more complete, more real, more capable of genuine connection and contribution. The scars from our inner fracturing become evidence of our resilience rather than sources of shame. Breaking inside and healing from it isn't a linear process with a clear endpoint. It's an ongoing journey of learning to honor our authentic experience while navigating a world that often rewards emotional suppression. There will be setbacks, moments of falling back into old patterns, times when the progress feels imperceptible. This is normal and expected. Healing happens in spirals rather than straight lines, with opportunities to revisit old wounds with new wisdom and deeper self-compassion. Each cycle through familiar struggles offers the possibility of responding with greater awareness and gentleness. Perhaps the most profound realization for people healing from breaking inside is that emotional honesty is sacred work. In a world filled with performance and pretense, choosing to be real with ourselves and others becomes an act of service to the collective human experience. When we honor our struggles, we contribute to a culture where others feel permission to honor theirs. When we practice self-compassion, we model it for those around us. When we choose connection over protection, we create spaces where authentic humanity can flourish. The person who has broken inside and learned to rebuild with awareness carries a particular gift. They know intimately that perfection is impossible and unnecessary. The strength includes vulnerability, that love is possible, even in our broken places. If you recognize yourself in these words, if you felt the quiet agony of breaking inside while maintaining your external composure, know this: your struggle is valid, your pain matters, and your capacity for healing is real. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You are not alone in your experience of invisible fracturing. You are human, beautifully and completely human, with all the complexity and contradiction that entails. The cracks in your heart are not flaws to be hidden, but openings where light enters, where wisdom grows, where compassion deepens. Your sensitivity is not a burden but a gift. Your struggles not evidence of failure, but proof of your willingness to feel deeply in a world that often demands numbness. The journey from breaking inside to living authentically is not easy, but it is possible. It requires courage, patience, and tremendous self-compassion. It asks you to risk being seen, to choose connection over control, to trust that you are worthy of love exactly as you are. And in that choice, to honor your authentic experience, to tend your wounds with gentleness, to rebuild with awareness, you become not just a survivor of breaking inside, but a pioneer of authentic living. You become living proof that it is possible to be fully human in all its messy, beautiful, complex glory. Your story of breaking and rebuilding becomes a beacon for others who are navigating their own silent struggles, a reminder that healing is possible, that authenticity is revolutionary, and that the very places where we break open can become the sources of our greatest strength and deepest wisdom. This is the ultimate paradox and promise of breaking inside. In learning to honor our fractures, we discover our wholeness. In accepting our brokenness, we find our way back to ourselves. In choosing authenticity over performance, we discover that we were never truly broken at all. We were simply human beings trying to navigate an inhuman expectation of perfection. And in that recognition lies the beginning of everything, the end of hiding, the start of healing, and the revolutionary act of living as fully, authentically, courageously human.